Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and several people have asked me if I would cover this again, and I've seen some anecdotal stories come through my feed, and people have asked me in the comments to cover this again because apparently there are multiple people out there now talking about branched chain amino acids stalling or completely stopping fat loss in people. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. In fact, I even had, when I made the last video on this, I had a young man come in and say, look, he had been supplementing with branched chain amino acids, and when he quit, he lost like 3 pounds. He had got a swoosh. His weight just finally dropped. He had stalled for weeks at the same weight on a cut. And therefore, that was proof that this theory was right. And guys, we need to understand it doesn't work that way. I'm going to get into this a little further with the branched chain amino acids themselves. And I don't want people to think I'm sitting here supporting supplements. I'm not a fan of supplements. There aren't many people out there who I would recommend branched chain amino acid supplements to. There aren't many people out there I would recommend a protein shake to. I think most people don't need any of these things to reach their goals. I don't really think they're particularly useful. They don't have any merits over just eating real food. But that doesn't mean that we should also spread silly misinformation about supplements either. And what I would say to the young man or multiple people who claimed that this happened to them, have you considered that that's a coincidence? I mean, when you look at it, do you really think there's any biological reason that these BCAAs would stop your fat loss and that it was a coincidence that you happened to change them? Do you know for a fact that's the only thing you changed? Because it might not be. And in fact, when it comes to stalls and fat loss, when you know for a fact you're in a calorie deficit, you're doing enough cardio, your calories are low enough and whatever, that you should be losing weight, and you've stalled a little bit on the scale for a few weeks, a lot of people aren't aware that that doesn't mean that you're not still losing body fat. Lyle McDonald has done a lot of research into this and has produced a lot of material on this. If you look into it, he's got actual scientific explanations for why you stall in fat loss while you continue to lose fat, meaning your weight stays the same. Sometimes the scale even goes up a little bit. And a lot of it has to do with your body trying to create a state of homeostasis. Your body doesn't like to change until it has to. We stay alive because our body tries to maintain balance within itself. And there are a lot of hormones and other systems in place to try to keep our body in balance. That's why we are alive. That's why we don't all die when we're little children. Our body tries to maintain balance in a lot of ways to keep us normal, to keep us healthy. So if you lose a bunch of tissue, what do you think your body does in response? It will try to create homeostasis. It will fill in areas where you just sucked fat out, burning it as fuel, burning it off. We'll put fluid in place of it sometimes, and sometimes that fluid will stay there a little while. That's your body trying to maintain homeostasis. So sometimes fat loss itself for a while will cause a little bit of water retention. And we're used to, when we first go on a cut, we first drop our calories down and up our cardio. What happens? We all lose a few pounds. There's a swoosh in water. Do you really think that you lost 3 pounds of fat that quick? No, you didn't lose 3 pounds of fat in a week. You lost a little water because you lose a little muscle glycogen. Some of your hormones shift around a little bit and your water swooshes down. Well, sometimes when we're losing tissue fat, sometimes when we've lost 2 or 3 pounds of fat, again, over the course of several weeks, our body doesn't want our homeostasis, our balance to shift, and it will cause you to retain a little bit of extra water. But it didn't mean you didn't lose the fat. And what happens sometimes when finally the hormones readjust, your aldosterone adjusts, your cortisol adjusts, because there's some confusion there. Yeah, cortisol can cause water retention, your stress hormones. Well, training can elevate cortisol. Stress can elevate cortisol. Sometimes reducing carbohydrates can elevate cortisol. All right, so that elevated cortisol from these things you're doing can be one of the factors that causes you to retain some extra water. And then when your body finally normalizes, you sometimes drop 3 or 4, or some people have been known to drop as much as 5 pounds within a 24-hour period when their scale has stalled for 3 or 4 weeks straight. All right, and that's Lyle McDonald always called that a swoosh. That your body finally recognizes that you've made a permanent change in the tissue weight, and it will go ahead and flush that extra water that it had been storing around that fat tissue area off. It'll swoosh it off. But then all of a sudden people think they've suddenly lost a bunch of fat over it. They didn't. They've been losing that fat for weeks. Their body finally recognizes the balance, that this is a permanent change. This is something you've been doing for weeks long term. It reaches that balance, it swooshes it off. But people will sometimes make drastic changes in what they're doing. All right, and it's for one person it's a BCAA, someone else will change something else. People will change things because they panic. They'll change something because they panic, but the reality is they were losing fat the whole time, and if, as long as they stayed in a calorie deficit, they will keep losing that fat. But they will panic and change something. And guys, if this has been done with dozens of things, this is how these rumors get created online. People start changing something, and then everyone else who stalls in their fat loss, who hears about it, sometimes makes the same change, but they all were actually losing fat. They just had a stall in weight loss. And then all of a sudden, they all see within a week, because they've reached that panic point to where they know they should be losing weight and they haven't. They reach that panic point and they make some change, and then they're all convinced. When several other people tried the same thing, I quit eating BCAAs in this case, or I quit drinking protein shakes, or I added a protein shake. Because you'll see people who also do things like, oh, they think BCAAs might help them burn fat, and they'll add BCAAs in, and then they'll swoosh. The little thing that you changed wasn't a factor, right? That's just anecdote. And when you really think about it, every single reason that people biologically talk about that BCAAs will stall fat loss, because it goes to your liver. Some of these amino acids go to your liver and they're converting to glycogen, and that glucose causes an insulin rise and that stalls fat loss. That same thing you're describing is true of everything you eat. All right, all proteins do that. It doesn't matter if it's BCAAs. It doesn't matter if you're taking hemp vegan protein or pea protein or whey protein or casein protein or a branched chain amino acid powder, or you're eating a chicken breast or a piece of grass-fed bison. Every single one of those things I just listed do the exact same thing in the liver that branched chain amino acids do, that everyone's freaking out about now, that's all over the internet, that people are talking about as causing stalling fat loss. So using that logic, you shouldn't eat any protein when you're trying to lose fat. Now, when you step back and look at that, how absurd does that sound? When you really look at that, essentially that same process that's being talked about means you shouldn't eat any protein at all, because protein stops fat loss. Yet high-protein diets are the single most successful proven method for recompositioning your body in terms of diet. Are they not? Yet this same biological chain of logic, if you apply the same things being applied to the BCAAs as applied to other foods, all proteins should be avoided. How many of you really want to cut your protein down really low when you're trying to lose fat and you stall? Do you really think that's a good idea? It's the same thing. And so again, I'm not telling people to take branched chain amino acids, but this whole concept that's being thrown out of how they stall fat loss is essentially applies to every protein source. In fact, a lot of people may not be aware, a whey protein shake oftentimes has more branched chain amino acids in it than the serving of BCAAs that you're taking. Sometimes your big chicken breast that you eat actually has more branched chain amino acids in it than your dose of your supplement does. You know, are we talking about not eating these foods when we want to lose body fat? Come on. That's absurd. It's insane. No one's telling anyone to do that, but it's the same chain of logic. So why do people fall for this stuff? They fall for this stuff because they have people out there who make it sound good. They make it sound scientific. They present, this is called bro science. They present a scientific explanation. Well, you know, because branched chain amino acids, the liver processes two of those three of them, the leucine and the valine, and, well, not the leucine, but the other two. The liver processes it in a way that turns it into glucose, into sugar, and then releases it in the bloodstream, and it causes an insulin response and stops your fat loss. Well, really? Then how do people who eat white rice lose fat? People do it all the time. How do people who eat brown rice lose fat? Telling me there's no one out there losing fat right now eating brown rice every day? Last time I checked, that's a hell of a lot of people online who are successfully cutting. It's the same logic. That has an insulin response and a sugar response in the body also. That's even stronger than branched chain amino acids produce it. Yet there are tons of people losing fat eating brown rice today, right now. Again, this is bullshit arguments. The only way branched chain amino acids would slow your fat loss is if you're adding like 1,000 calories a day of them in and it's pushing you out of a calorie deficit. That's the only way it could possibly do that. Remember, guys, stalls in weight loss are normal. Even when you're losing body fat, they're perfectly normal. They happen to everybody. That's how the human body works. It just has to do with shifts in fluid balance and water weight. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.